And we'll continue with the 15th chapter of A Gathering of Gargoyles, which is called Sibyl. Although there is no Sibyl, there is only Dirna, the woman who stole Ariel's husband, Irilath, and gave him to the Lorelei. She has wrapped Ariel in a shawl and attached her to a stone that is supposed to eat her. However, Ariel is slowly getting free because she had rubbed some ambergris on one of her arms. Also, Raptor, the final gargoyle, is in the control of the Sibyl and a magic pipe. Ariel reached for her staff. It stood against the wall beside the stone out of her range. The gargoyle hissed, slinking before Dirna. Ariel reached with one leg, brushing her walking stick with the ball of her foot. "Where are the other gargoyles?" Dirna snapped. Still, she held the raptor's collar, her whistle raised. She did not even glance at Ariel. Ariel towed her staff. It toppled toward her. Falling across her, she grabbed at it, but missed. "Heron!" she cried. "Heron! Fly! Find Taub! Tell him to keep the gargoyles away!" As the staff fell past her, the heron shimmered, her form unstiffened suddenly and flew. Dirna wheeled about. With a snarl of rage, she lunged after the winged thing, but the white bird was already through the temple door. Eyes on Dirna, the gargoyle sank into a crouch. "Little fool," Dirna spat, turning on Ariel. "So you have given them to someone to keep for you. It does not matter. If they are near enough to hear my pipe, then they will come to me. They must." She raised the whistle to her lips and blew again. The raptor, inching forward behind her, flattened itself to the ground with a cry. Ariel felt her hair tearing as she wrenched her head away, for the note was piercing, deafening, rang until it seemed the mountain must fall. Then it ceased, and in the silence Ariel heard the yelp of the gargoyles, very faint and far-seeming. The harridan smiled. "So they are coming. Good." She wrapped her arms about herself, laughing. "Ah, the lady will be so pleased. What will she give me in reward? Something rare, surely. Something powerful and fine." Ariel heard the scuffle of footsteps. The red-eyed woman turned. "Eh?" She called out. "What's that? Who's there?" Ariel saw nothing. The hag cast about her. "Are you a servant of my lady? Where are you?" She gave a cry suddenly, caught her wrist. Clutching the whistle tighter, she flailed empty air. Then, seeming to break free at once from nothing, she staggered back. The gargoyle in the corner yipped. Dirna groped, struck out at random. A puff of dust appeared from nowhere, scattered in midair. The harridan shrieked, rubbing her eyes. A pebble skittered across the room. She whirled, then stopped herself, turned back around. She laughed and closed her eyes. "Would you blind me?" she said. "Confound me with charms. I was blind once. Did you think I could not find you by the sound of your own breathing? A darrow in a day cloak." Abruptly she sprang, caught hold of nothing, and yanked. A gray cloak came into being in her hand. The Duro, too. He stood before her in her shadow, his arms raised, a look of astonishment upon his face. Ariel tried to cry a warning. While he was yet in shadow, the Duro's hand darted from his robe, but Dirna was already leaping back. The light of Solstar fell on him, and for an instant the little man remained flesh. Then he froze, the color of stone washing over him like a wave, his one hand still hidden in his robe. Ariel heard the yelp of gargoyles again, very small and faint. Dirna stood, peering at the statue before her. "Master Treasure Keeper," she exclaimed, "after so long. You are not one I ever expected to see again. I thought surely you went with that Eastern woman of the king's when she left Averick." She tossed the day cloak away from her then, pawing at her eyes. "I cannot see properly. That dust. If you ruined my lovely eyes, little fiend, I'll pass you to rubble before Solstar sets." The sun hung very, very low. "No," Ariel whispered. Her strength was vanishing. The tremor of the stone had grown terribly strong. She felt her garments moldering to dust. "He has not harmed you." The hag ignored her. Sitting down, she fished the carbuncles from beneath her lids. Brushing at them, Dirna smoothed them against her palms. Then she began to polish in earnest, using the hem of her sackcloth kirtle. "Are they scratched? Are they scratched? Soon we will see. I'll make the lady give me a new pair in exchange for the gargoyles. I've earned a new pair." A shadow fell across her hunched figure. Eyeless now, she did not notice it. Then the 2 jewels were taken roughly from her. The crouching woman cried out, whirled, groping. The heron skimmed through the temple door, landing near Ariel. I could not find your invisible Darrow in that day cloak of his, she said, so I brought another person who said he was looking for you. Ariel felt a rush of unbelief, followed by a wild gladness. A cry escaped her lips. The figure beside Dirna glanced at her, but his face was hard, very pale and drawn, and she could not read it. His dress was the white garb of Avaric, much mended along the shoulder and dusty with travel. His skin was gold, his black hair fastened behind him in a long horsetail, 5 scars threaded across one cheek. His eyes were cold, corundum blue. Well, nurse, said Iralath, holding the withered woman's eyes. After so long, you are not the one I expected to see. Have you been well? You do not look it. Nor have I been well, these past double dozen years, 10 of them spent in the witch's house and 14 more Dark Angel because of you. Iralath, the eyeless woman whispered. Iralath! You know me, then? Dirna clutched her kirtle's hem. My little darling, my lovely prince, where are you? I cannot see you. Her hands fluttered desperately, but Iralath slipped away from her. Dirna whispered, But you are alive, my sweet, alive. I thought you drowned in a desert lake. You shoved me in, the eyeless woman cried out, biting one knuckle. No, I never. She caught herself suddenly, bit off her words. Then she drew deep breath. Her voice grew quieter, more sweet. You fell, don't you remember? I took you to the lake to show you the mudlick. Her hands crept across the floor now, searching for him. You slipped. I tried to catch you. I held out my hand, don't you recall? Iralath turned the carbuncles over in his palms. His face had lost its stoniness. His voice was not quite steady when he spoke. That is not what you once told this girl, who later told me. Dirna hissed, turning toward Ariel. How do you know her? Ariel watched, unable to move. Iralath's face was all in shadow now, turned from the sun. Only the dim glow from the fire pit lit him eerily from below. Ariel felt almost afraid of him then. I am wed to her, he whispered. She is my wife. No, Dirna shrieked, gargled, muttered in her throat. No, she is a wicked, clever girl, my love. It's lies she has been telling you. Iralath did not reply. His gaze was fixed on Ariel, his lips slightly parted, as though he might be able to tell her something, but he did not speak. Beside him, Dirna moaned, clawed at her cheeks. Give me my eyes. The young man turned away then, holding the carbuncles clenched in his hands. You traded my life to the White Witch, he breathed, for a sip of foul water. For our lives, Dirna cried. We would have perished in the desert if I had not given you to her. How cruel you have become, the eyeless woman groaned, wringing her hands. You never used to be so cruel to your old nurse, your Dirna. The prince shuddered, staring at her. You took me from those who might have taught me kindness, he spat, and gave me to one who taught me other things. Dirna's hands found him at last. This time he did not pull away. Would you have an eye? Here, take it. He held out his arm. Dirna's fingers groped along it. Just before they found his hand, Iralath opened it, letting one carbuncle drop. It fell among the coals of the fire pit. Dirna cried out. Not the fire, she screamed. The heat will shatter it. Fetch it out, then, whispered Iralath. Dirna's hand clutched, finding a poker at the fire pit's edge. She began stirring it feverishly among the coals. Just as Ariel heard a crackling sound, saw a puff of yellow smoke rise from the pit, smelled sulphur. Ruined, shrieked Dirna. You have ruined my eye. There is still one left, the prince reminded her, holding it up. Dirna clawed his hand, but his fingers only tightened. And one's enough to see by, isn't it? He pulled away from her, strode to the temple door, and threw the stone. It glinted red in Solstar's white glare. The sun lay half sunk into the hills. Sailing over the cliff's edge, the carbuncle vanished. Dirna stumbled to the cave's threshold. The rocks, she wailed. I'll never find it among the rocks. You might, the prince replied savagely. Go look for it. And strode past her to Ariel. A plague on you, the harridan screamed. A plague on you to have destroyed my eyes. She scrambled after him, one hand searching the floor, her fingers closed on the iron spindle. She swung it, caught the young man on the back of the head. He cried out, taken by surprise, and turned, falling to one knee. Derna darted past him. "I will get new eyes," she said. "Did you think to drag her from the stone? Too late, my prince. She's lost. I will have new eyes. I will have her eyes before she crumbles." Derna had dropped the spindle now. Standing toward the back of the cave, Ariel cried out, fighting the pull of the stone. Its hum was louder, the tremor harder. Her skin felt like powder. Her garments were dust. The clinging shawl was falling away in shreds. Derna's shadow passed over the Darrow in that instant. His arm completed its motion. Drawing the black velvet bag from his robe, Ariel saw it twitch, heard the yelp of gargoyles, very faint and far-seeming still. The raptor cowering in the corner snarled, seemed to be gaining courage. The Darrow's fingers, momentarily flesh, moved upon the bag's drawstring, but the hag's shadow had passed, and the little mage froze, the color of stone washing over him again in the light of Solstar. Ariel reached desperately for her staff. It lay upon the floor, beyond the reach of her captured arm. Irelath staggered to his feet. The heron took wing, flew at the harridan, but the eyeless woman ducked, batting her away. Derna stumbled against the stone. Her hands groped, searching for Ariel. Ariel cried out, shrinking away from her, struggling. She felt her skin crumbling, tearing. A warm dampness oozed beneath her shoulder on the stone. Her arm, part of her back, came free. She could sit, she could turn. Ariel snatched her staff from the floor. Derna's fingernails snagged her cheek. Ariel struck out at her, turned her face away. The hag seized the walking stick. Reaching with her other hand, Ariel kicked, caught at her wrist. Beyond her, she saw the raptor spring, but not at Derna, at the mage. It seized the velvet bag in its teeth, straining against the stone hand's grip. Then, all at once, there came a fury of gargoyles. Screaming and hooting, snarling and lunging, the little bag shredded to tatters as the gray beast struggled free. Derna cried out. She whirled. Irelath caught at her arm, but she twisted away, ducking behind him. She fled the cave. The gargoyles plunged after her, a storm of shrieking and screams. The harridan sprang from the temple porch. At the cliff's edge she halted, whirling. Irelath's shadow lay on the Darrow now, and the little man was once more flesh. Derna faced them, brandishing something small and silver. The gargoyles checked their headlong rush. "Stay, monsters," she shouted. "I hold the witch's whistle still. Kill the Avaric prince and his Darrow and his bride, and find my eye among the rocks. I serve the White Lady, and you must serve me." She was raising her lean and leathery arm. She was putting the whistle to her lips when something white and winged skimmed through the temple door. The heron sailed, stroking Solstar. The heron sailed, stroking. Solstar's light shone through her wings. She flew in the face of the harridan and plucked the pipe from Derna's hand. The hag cried out, spun, snatching after it. Cliff edge beneath her, one heel crumbled, fell into dust. She seemed to hang in space a moment. Then the earth beneath her other heel gave way. With a cry she toppled, vanishing beyond the rim of the altar cliffs. And with a yell like hounds after their prey, the gargoyles plowed after her over the edge. And that's the end of chapter 15.